Welcome to another edition of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. And this is a book review. And it is a book that absolutely changed my life and has changed tons of my coaching clients' lives and friends who have said, you really need to read this book. And then I heard the statistics about reading. And the average CEO reads 60 books a year. The average American reads 4 books a year. So I thought, how can I get you guys to pick this book up? Because it's going to change your mind. And I thought, well, if I just kind of give you some highlights of it, review the book for you, maybe that you'll go out and get it. And it is a powerful, life-changing deal. Now, it started off, James Clear started it off talking about when he was in high school. He was a sophomore and somebody let go of a bat accidentally and it broke his nose. His brain was swollen. It was a really, really bad deal. I mean, to where he had to learn things all over again, which he was able to do with tiny incremental steps, right? Little bitty habits. And so when you think of the word atomic, a lot of times you might think of something that's huge, like a big mushroom cloud, and it's this huge, destructive, huge thing. Atomic means tiny, little bitty, tiny things. Now, what made me pick this book up was, what on Audible, when you can listen to the clip, I listened to it and he talked about the British cycling team on that clip is what I heard. And that's also in chapter 1. So the British cycling team was so bad. How bad were they? They were so bad that the bike manufacturers refused to sell bikes to them. They were embarrassing. They just were never winning. They never did very well. And so they hired this new coach in 2003. The coach comes in and he makes tiny little 1% improvements, things that you would go, that is ridiculous. Why are you wasting your time with that little bitty thing? Well, here's why. One of the things they did was they changed their uniforms from outdoor to indoor because it made it go faster. They painted the inside of the trailer that hauled the bicycles white so they could see if there was even the smallest little speck of dust. They changed the bicycle seats to where they were more comfortable. They taught the cyclists how to wash their hands properly so that they didn't get sick. I mean, all kinds of silly little bitty things. However, the results were absolutely remarkable. They had only won 1 medal in the previous 100 years. After this coach came in, guys, they won 60% of the gold medals at the next Olympics. They won the Tour de France over and over again. And so please don't blow off tiny little habits. Think about what's one tiny little habit that you could do now that would make a positive impact in the future. Something really simple, like if you want to read more, put a book beside your bed, make it easy. He goes into, how your habits shape your identity for the good and for the bad, right? So people want to change something in their life and they say, okay, I want to run a marathon. Well, until they change who they are, it doesn't stick, right? So instead of saying, well, here's a good example from my life personally. I was a 2-pack-a-day smoker way, way, way back when. I did a Tony Robbins 30-day program. And in it, he had you write down 5 questions, I think it was. It was on day 2 of the 30-day program. And I wrote down the 5 questions and answered them. And what will be the benefit if you do change this? What will be the cost if you don't? All these things. And I decided that night that I would quit smoking the next morning. The next morning when I walked in, I was managing a convenience store. My midnight man was there. He was a smoker. So I threw him my pack of cigarettes and I said, you can have these. I quit. And everybody else that day that I told I quit, they all said, oh, we've heard that before. Yeah, we've heard that before. But that young man said, oh, I believe you. And I said, why? Everyone else is doubting that I really did quit, and you believe me. Why? And he said, because you said I quit. You didn't say I'm trying to quit, right? And so you have to identify yourself as a non-smoker, right? So instead of trying to just change habit, the habits that really last are the ones where you change your identity. You think about, who do I want to be like? And then you start to change the identity to become like that person. So you start to adapt the habits of those. Tony Robbins calls that modeling, right? You see what someone is doing and you model what they do. You don't try to become them. That's silly, guys. that's just silly. But you do model the things that they do in the area that you're impressed with, right? So James Clear, in his book, talked about a lot of different things. The British cycling team was what got me to read the book. There was another story that was just mind-boggling. There was a paramedic and her husband went to her in-laws' house for dinner. And when they got there, she saw her father-in-law. She looked him in the face and she said, "I don't like the way you look." And he said, "Well, I don't like the way you look either," kind of joking. And she said, "No, I'm serious. We need to get you to the hospital right now." They listened to her. They took the man to the hospital. Turns out he was that close to having a severe, could have been a widowmaker heart attack. How did she know? She did not understand that it was the blood that had left his face that she had seen so many times in other patients. She couldn't have explain, why do I know that something's wrong with you? Much like, I used to work at a convenience store and I could grab a handful of quarters and I could tell you how many were in there. Now I sell homes. I can walk into a home and I can tell you it's this many square feet, give or take a little bit. And so there are things that our brains are doing that we're really not paying attention to. And so those cues kind of trigger habits. And when you are aware of them, then you adjust your environment and you make the good habits really easy and the bad habits really hard. So, for example, if you want to spend less money, you take your credit card and you freeze it in a block of ice. And you don't get to use it until by the time it melts down, that initial, I just want this thing, melts away. Of course, I know now we're not using hard actual credit cards for most things, but still, it's that thinking. If you don't want to have the first thing you do in the morning look at your cell phone, well, put your cell phone somewhere else, right? Don't have it right next to you so the first thing you do is grab it. And so many habits that we have, we're completely oblivious to. We don't even know that we have it. And so in order to start a new habit, it's really good to take baby steps. It's really good to just do a minute of something. Like, say you decide, you know what, I think meditation is stupid, but I see all these people that I really am impressed with and they enjoy meditation, so I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, so I'm just going to do meditation for when I first wake up for 1 minute, right? You attach it to something else that you already know. So he calls that habit stacking. And that is a brilliant, I'm telling you, I've implemented so many things that I wanted to do in the past that I didn't. So as soon as you finish brushing your teeth, then you fill in the blank. What is it that you want to change? And so you have to have little tricks and tips. So there was a woman who wanted to change the eating habits of an entire hospital. And she said, I'm not going to talk to any of them. I'm not going to try and change them or tell them what's healthy, what's not healthy. All she did was she went in and she changed the cafeteria around. When you walked into the cafeteria in the past, there was candy and cookies and sodas and everything right there at reach. All she did was put extra water in all the different places that you might walk. She put the sodas and the candies way in the back where people aren't going to pass them very much. Just changing your environment will totally change everything around you. We are creatures of habit, so much so that we're not even aware of the things and the cues that make us do certain things. Like if you ever were a smoker, maybe you only smoked when you went out to a club. Well, as soon as you go back to a club after 20 years of not going, then you're thinking, why do I want a cigarette? Well, because it was a cue that you didn't even know was there. And so paying attention to your environment and changing your environment makes it much, much easier to choose the right thing instead of the wrong thing. I mean, think about it. When you're hungry and you go and you open up your refrigerator and you stand there and you stare at it and there's nothing that you really want. What if you had cut up some nice pieces of celery and carrots and it was just really easy to grab something that was healthy? If you have whole nuts out on the counter instead of like a piece of candy, if the candy's there, you're going to grab it. And so pay attention to your environment and it makes your good habits way easier and your bad habits way harder. Make it hard to make the wrong choices. Motivation is overrated. That's one of his chapters. Environments matter most. So the lady who did that really cool deal at the hospital, her name was Anne Thorndike, and she was a doctor at Massachusetts General Hospital. And she basically changed the dietary choices of an entire hospital staff, all the patients that came, all the visitors, by just moving the soda away from eye level, right? So if you can't learn something from that, like if there's something in your life and you're not being honest with yourself, right now, be honest with yourself. There's nobody here but you, right? Be honest with yourself and ask yourself, what one little habit can I change that would make a massive difference everywhere else in my life too? And it's just something that bugs me that I do, but I just figure that's just who I am. Think about that and then try and change your surroundings to match it. So self-control, guys, self-control is it's tough. It's tough. And so how many of you saw the marshmallow study that was done? I think it was done in like 1972 or something. And they had the little 6-year-olds. Really, it was so precious. If you have not watched it, go to Google and watch the marshmallow experiment because it was really cool. And so you've got these little kids and you take them into a room and you have a marshmallow on a plate. And they're in this room and they've got this marshmallow and they want that marshmallow so bad. But the what do you call them? The guys who do the test or ladies who do the test said, I make you a deal. You can have that marshmallow right now or anytime you want to. However, if you can wait for 15 minutes and when I come back in, then you can have 2 marshmallows. And so they would put cameras on these poor kids. And you guys, it's one of the cutest things you've ever seen in your life because they wanted that marshmallow so bad, but they wanted 2 marshmallows. And so they're like looking at it and they're like, a couple of them would just touch it with their tongue just a little bit. They were so excited about this marshmallow. And the interesting thing was they went back 20 years later and they interviewed these kids that were the marshmallow kids. And the kids who had what we like to call delayed gratification ability, those are the ones who waited the 15 minutes and they got the 2 marshmallows. Those kids, the ones who could delay it, were so much more successful and happy in their lives than the people who had to have instant gratification. And so we all have a limited amount of what we call discipline. Let's say, for example, that for you, it's M&Ms and you love M&Ms. And when you walk into your office, the receptionist at the front desk has a bowl of M&Ms right there. And every time you walk by it, you have to use your resistance and you have to not eat them and not eat them. Well, let me tell you something. By the end of the day, your muscle is exhausted. And that night, you'll probably eat a big old cheesecake before you go to bed, right? So instead of letting your resistance muscle get worn down, set up your environment in a different way. Ask the receptionist, hey, could you put like a card in front of that or something so I don't see it all the time because it's really hard for me. We have to make our environment as temptation-free as possible. Another really cool thing that the book gives you all kinds of clues and hints. You have to get this book, guys. It gives you all kinds of clues and hints as to how to make yourself do things that you don't really want to do. There was this young engineering student who loved to binge on Netflix, but he also knew that he was getting a little bit wide around the waist, and so he figured out a way to put his stationary bike and click it in together, and the only way that Netflix would work is if he was riding at a certain level. And if he slowed down, it would stop. And so if there's something that you really don't want to do, why don't you try and do it with something that you really do want to do? It's kind of like he calls it temptation bundling. And so you pair those 2 actions together and it makes that action that you really didn't want to do, the riding, a whole lot more appealing. Here's a big one, guys. This is very important, and it's the role of your friends and your family as far as your habits go. You become like the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And that is proven over and over again. My business partner, Kristen, 6 years ago when she started working with me, when I had the Remax, she was my office manager. And she would say something that would just drive me crazy at the time. When things were just crazy and I wanted to have a fit and blah, 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 she would say, "Oh my goodness." And I thought, "Oh my goodness, really? That's your response? I want to rah." And she would say, "Oh my goodness." Well, let me tell you guys, it wasn't long. One day I was at my home all by myself. Something happened and I said, "Oh my goodness." And I went, "Oh my goodness." I'm saying, "Oh my goodness," because I'm around someone who's saying it. And we do that. That is ingrained in us forever and ever. So when you're making new habits, sometimes it's really hard to be around the same people with your new habits. Let's say, for example, that every time you see your sister, you have to have a drink. You feel like you have to have a drink because she's always drinking, and so you're always drinking. If you hang out with people who are like you want to be, and maybe they're people that work out all the time, maybe you start to become more like the people that you surround yourself with. Jim Rohn, famous quote, "You will become like the 5 people that you spend the most time with." And so it's super important that you pick the people that you want to have influence you. So one of the other chapters is really cool. All of them are amazing, and you will get so many tips. Guys, seriously, get this book. Read this book. It will help you. I mean, it will, there's another book out there called Getting Out of Your Own Way. Well, this should go hand in hand with that. You can't get out of your own way if you keep the same bad habits that you've always had and you start to change. So the law of least effort. If you're walking up to a department store and there are doors that are open and there are doors over here that you have to actually physically pull it open, most humans are going to go through the doors that are open. I mean, go to a place that has an escalator and stairs. The escalator will be packed. Oh, it's all packed in there. The stairs, you got one person that decides, "I'm going to take the stairs," which is another great book you should read. Seriously, great book. Take the stairs. But that's who we are. We need to work with who we are. We need to know who we are and work with who we are. And so the Japanese have a very unique way. If you ever go on their train system, they have a very unique way that they do everything. And they call it pointing and calling. And so pointing and calling, the whole point of that was to get the errors down and make sure that everybody was safe. And it requires less mental effort. And so when it happened, James Clear actually saw this happen. He was in Japan and he saw it happen where the conductor person, it was like, "We're ready to go, doors checked," and they would point at each door, and they would say, "Doors checked, this check, that check," and they would point and say out loud what it was. And he saw this little, like probably 3-year-old kid and her mom getting onto the train. The kid got on, the mom wasn't able to. She stuck her arm through the door, scared to death trying to get to her child. And the point and click guy saw it and said, "Stop," let her in. They embraced. It was beautiful. However, you can do the same thing and I bet you do. I bet you do. How many of you do the pat down when you're leaving the house, right? I got my keys, I got my wallet, I got my this, I got my that, right? We need to do that. It reduces the friction in our lives, and it makes things, you're taking care of your future self, right? And how does that feel, guys? Think about it. When you do something today and then tomorrow you wake up and it's there already, you're ready to go. It's great. So say one of my coaching clients, which is business and life coaching, wants to lose 100 pounds. I'll ask them questions. It has to be them that has the answer, and it comes through them. And I'll ask them, what did they used to do physically that worked for them? And let's say it's walking. Okay. Then my assignment for you this week is, the only assignment I have for you this week is that you have your walking clothes beside your bed. So when you wake up, the first thing you do, of course, you go to the Tinkletorium, but then you put on your shoes, you put on your stuff, you head out the door, and you walk to your mailbox. That's it. Turn around, come back for a week. That's all you do. Why? Walking to the mailbox going to help them lose 100 pounds? Yeah, actually, because it's the start. The hardest part of any new habit is starting. We don't like change. We avoid change, right? And so once you get into the habit that you're walking to the mailbox, and then when we meet the next week, how did it go? Oh, I did it. I did all 7 days. I walked to the mailbox all 7 days. Okay, cool. This time, I want you to walk to the mailbox and down to the end of the corner and then back. And then the next week. And then the next thing you know, they're 100 pounds lighter. And that is how people don't give enough. You're not going to give me a pat on the back because I walked to the mailbox, right? But your coach will give you a pat on the back because you walked to the mailbox, because they know it's those little tiny actions that give you the end result that you're looking for. And so I want to encourage you to celebrate when you do walk to the mailbox. Give yourself a pat on the back and go, good, thank you for taking care of me, right? Because nobody else is going to do it. No one can fix it for you but you. Then there's always that you can put limits on yourself that no one else can. And this is kind of a fun story. I'm sure you probably heard it sometime in the past. You might not remember it, but Victor Hugo was procrastinating, and he really, really was procrastinating, and he couldn't make himself right. And so finally he said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my servant, and I'm going to say, lock away all of my clothes, because there's no way he's going out naked. So that's what he did. And that kept him in the house, and he wouldn't allow himself to leave the house until he finished what he was writing. That seems extreme. I get it. However, how bad do you need to make the change? Guys, if you need to lose 20 pounds, it might not be that severe. If you need to lose 400 pounds, you need to lock yourself away and do whatever you need to do for your safety, right? For your health. So create an environment where your good habits are the default habits, right? That's just the way it is. Think back when you were a kid and you would go visit someone else's family, and their family was way different than your family in a good way. And you were just kind of looking and, wow, they do that differently, and they do that differently, and they do that differently. You don't have to live by the rules that were pounded into you by your family of origin, guys. You don't need to do that. You actually can change. And it's just, change a little bit at a time. So Jerry Seinfeld would write a joke every day, no matter what. He'd take a big X and write it on his calendar that he wrote a joke. And so that was his pat on the back. You did it, man. You wrote the joke. And so it helped him to stay consistent. It helped him stay productive. And that is really important. It's the little tiny things. When you see someone that is uber successful and you're just like, whoa, how did you get to that point? Guys, it's the boring little things that they did to get there that work. So take a page out of Jerry Seinfeld's book and use visual cues to keep you motivated and keep you going. And you can go on to Word and print out a blank calendar for the month, and that's your deal. And instead of putting X's, you might want to put hearts or something, something different to make it more fun for you. Using accountability is another thing that he really talks about a lot, and an accountability partner really truly can change everything. I'm telling you, I am someone who didn't want anyone to hold me accountable to anything ever. I was anti anybody telling me what to do or doing any of that kind of stuff. However, I'm telling you, I have been accountability partners with 2 people now for, it's been at least 2 years, maybe more. And every morning we write out our affirmations, we take pictures, we send it to each other. And there are days that I guarantee you I wouldn't do it if I didn't want to not let them down, right? Because I know the fact that I'm doing it helps push them to do it. And the fact that they're doing it helps push me to do it. And it does make a big difference. All those little habits, they add up and they matter. He also talks about how it's really important to align your habits with your natural inclinations. What is your proclivity? Do you do you normally like this, or is your body shaped this way and you'd be better at this sport than that sport? So like Michael Phelps, for example, his torso is really, really long, and he is perfectly built to be a swimmer. Would he be a good, runner? And not that he can't run, but the odds of him really, really excelling in that are super slim because of the way his body is built. And so he talks about making sure that if your natural proclivity is to do this or that, and your interest is there, then focus on those things. In other words, if you're 6 foot tall, you probably don't want to train to be a jockey, right? It wouldn't work out that well. So I started this off by talking about reading books and how few books most people read. It is such an important habit if you want your life to be bigger or different or more than it is right now. You will be the exact person you are today 5 years from now, except for the books that you read and the people that you meet. And so my hope is that after listening to or seeing this podcast, we are on YouTube and all that good stuff too, that you'll want to read, you'll want to know more, you'll want to understand more. And so Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are very well known for being avid readers. Warren Buffett reads 500 pages a day. Think about the compounding interest of that. And this book would be a great place to start the habit of reading. I want to encourage you to pick up the book and read it. One of my biggest fans, one of my biggest listeners, I got him to listen to it years ago, and he swears by it. It makes your productivity explode because you're not wasting a bunch of time. You're not, oh, where are my keys? Oh, I can't find my phone. Oh, I can't, make your habit, set up your environment to where it serves you. Thank you. Please share this if it was helpful to you. Subscribe, write stuff in, and let me know what other books that you would like me to do this with. Thank you, guys.